You are listening to I Am Interchange.
I am interchange.
I am interchange.
I am Interchange.
Fostering curiosity, education, and empathy by exploring the controversial and the provocative.
I am interchange.
Hey there, Tate Chamberlain here, welcoming Paul Nachman to this episode of I Am Interchange, examining the polarities of compassion versus practicality. Paul grew up in the 50s and 60s in Chicago, attending public schools in the heart of the city. As a young man, he was a voracious reader and taught himself the foundations of astronomy and scientific study that would help inform his career as a physicist. He's currently an associate research professor of physics at Montana State University here in Bozeman. As an adult, he became active in the anti-illegal immigration political movement while living in California. He believes unchecked immigration is an invitation for chaos, with cultural and language differences creating a divide between citizens. In particular, he sees the lack of assimilation of ethnic groups into American culture, causing conflict and a lack of community, or as he describes it, a bunch of warring tribes within our nations.
Diversity of the kind they're talking about is not a strength. People of different ethnic groups, of different religions, of different languages, they conflict with each other. I think it's a bad thing because you can't talk to you can't talk to your fellow citizens. Well, if everyone knows all the same languages, well then you can, but then the extra languages are a waste of effort. It's not a community. It's a bunch of warring tribes.
For Paul, collective or systemic compassion is a setup for failure, causing us to overextend our resources and create policies that make us feel good instead of bringing order to society. During this episode, we'll dive into his beliefs that a certain degree of separation and a great measure of practicality makes us stronger as a nation. Zocalo Coffee House is the official coffee house of I Am Interchange. It's the perfect atmosphere to grab coffee with a friend or to work remotely. Even though I've built my dream workspace at Blunderbuss, I still find Zocalo to be the perfect, productive spot when I need a change of scenery. Hey, Paul. How are things going?
My hovercraft is full of eels.
We to fill you in, we were just talking about Monty Python.
Monty Python.
I've got this book of, it seems like near all of his writing, but you mentioned you couldn't quite find it.
Haven't found it yet.
It's a pretty thick book.
Oh, so you're asking how are things going? I feel like I'm not accomplishing. I have many things to do, and I'm not accomplishing much.
I feel that because the list is so long, it's kind of overwhelming. So you're being shot all over the place with not only you do some work up at the university with the physics department.
Yes.
And you have the Montanans for Immigration Law Enforcement.
Which is a website, informational website really, and an email list.
Cool. I want to just talk a little bit about your history. Where did you grow up?
From the city of Chicago, in the city. Went to public schools. You could get a good education in Chicago public schools, at least some of them back in my era, which is, like 1953 to 1966, yeah, kindergarten through.
Okay, yeah, you're my dad's age.
Yeah,
and so a lot
within a few weeks, or
I think so.
I'm a few months older, maybe. Anyway.
Yeah, something like that. You remind me of him in some ways. He grew up in California, and his parents are a little bit hard around immigration, and they've really experienced.
Is his parents still around?
No, they're not. They passed away half dozen years ago.
Okay, and where in California?
They were in San Jose. He tells me the story of growing up in San Jose with all of the cherry trees and
the agriculture, and then becomes a sprawl.
So when you were in Chicago, you went to public school system. What did your parents do?
My dad was an engineer. He had his own little company. He was a consulting engineer, worked with architects in the design of big buildings, the heating, ventilating, air conditioning, plumbing, electrical. And he had a small firm that he started with his dad right after World War II. And over time, some of his employees became partners with him. He was a much beloved boss. The firm ever got to be as big as maybe 20 people, and it ebbed and flowed. It was in downtown Chicago.
Wow.
Commuted by commuter train.
An entrepreneur.
Yeah, I don't think he would actually have thought of himself as an entrepreneur, because he said after World War II it was easy to get started doing anything because there was, I guess, so much pent-up demand. But I always admired him for it, because I'm not an entrepreneur.
Yeah, we've had that talk a little bit. So he didn't describe himself as an entrepreneur, but he still was kind of a leader.
Yeah, he was, because he was very involved in community organizations as well, and the Unitarian Church, and quickly rose into leadership roles wherever he went. And it wasn't because he muscled in; people just looked up to him.
He just kind of naturally had that charisma. And
Yeah, it's
trust
well,
around him.
I don't know about charisma. It's not like he gave speeches, or he was not really a political figure. He was interested in politics, but he was just very, very admired as a very, I don't know, what would you say, grounded person. Very, I guess right now I can't think of a better word.
Yeah. Okay. And how about your mom?
She was housewife through at least until I was into high school. And then she went back, she was a college grad, and she went back to school for a master's degree so she could teach in the Chicago public schools, which she did for 10 years or so, probably starting when I was late in high school, or maybe even when I was out of high school, I don't remember.
Oh, okay. What grades?
Primary grades.
Okay, so K through 5?
Even probably just through 3, probably
Okay.
third grade highest.
Cool. My mom was a first grade teacher in Colorado.
Colorado, yeah.
Yeah.
And where was your mom from?
She's from Connecticut.
Yeah.
They met in Colorado, my mom and my dad, kayaking.
Oh, kayaking and what? On the Colorado River?
Yeah, on the Colorado River, the Gunnison, I think a handful of other segments of those rivers called like Whitewater and Westwater. And so after grade school, did you stick around Chicago?
After high school?
After high school?
No, I went away to college. I started at Grinnell in Iowa, Grinnell College, a small liberal arts college. I'd gone to an all-boys high school, technical high school, public technical high school, all boys. Back then it was 5,500 guys.
Wow.
And my folks and I thought it'd probably be good to go to a liberal arts college.
Was it good for you, the liberal arts school?
It was very good. I started at Grinnell, had a terrific physics teacher my first year, and he left for Carleton. He took a new job at Carleton. He was a new prof. He was in the second year at Grinnell when I encountered him. I wound up following him to Carleton half a year later. So I went to 2 pretty well-known liberal arts colleges in the Midwest, and I like both of them. I like Carleton more, actually.
Okay.
Carleton's in Northfield, Minnesota, about 50 miles south of the Twin Cities. Same town as St. Olaf College, the fairly well-known Lutheran school. Northfield, Minnesota, the signs at the entrance to the town back then said cows, colleges, and contentment. Well, there were the 2 colleges, and it was a farming area.
Did the population change as you left town on the sign because it was so small?
Yeah, I don't remember the population numbers changing one way or the other.
You know that joke where my town's so small that the population sign...
Oh, as you... No, it was probably 5,000.
Oh, okay. So you got inspired to be a physicist during this time?
Yeah, actually, that was starting from 4th grade.
Really?
Yeah, 4th grade. It used to be, I don't know if I might have told you this before, I was too lazy to go to the public library, but my mom would go to the library and she'd bring home books. She'd just bring home books she thought I might be interested. I read everything she brought home. And so probably when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, she brought home some astronomy books, and I read them. So I knew more about astronomy than anyone else in the class, and we had a unit on it in 4th grade. So I was the class expert. And that's when I decided I wanted to be an astronomer, and that's really part of physics. It's the first part of physics, but nowadays it's just part of physics.
Oh, okay.
So, I was going to be an astronomer, and
I love that.
And a physics major is a natural thing. It's better to be a physics major than to be an undergrad astronomy major, although an astronomy major would be mostly a physics major anyway.
So you would call a cluster of stars instead of a constellation an asterism?
A what?
An asterism?
Asterism. I don't know that word.
I'm going to look it up right now.
Spell it.
ASTERISM.
Well, that's how I would spell it, but I never heard the word.
Prominent pattern or group of stars typically having a popular name but smaller than a constellation.
Well, like the Pleiades, I suppose. You've ever heard
Yeah,
of the
okay,
Pleiades?
yeah, the Seven Sisters of Pleiades.
So they are an asterism?
I guess so.
Okay, well, that's what I learned today.
I took Mysteries of the Sky class at the university in my freshman year and loved it.
That was here?
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they still do it, but I don't have a huge education around astronomy.
I think actually they probably do teach a class like that. You remember who taught it?
That was in
A long time ago.
2002. Jeff something.
Oh, Jeff Adams?
Yeah, it sounds familiar. I had a mountain board at the time, and he rode it down the stairs in front of our class one day and didn't fall.
Yeah, what
A mountain board? Yeah, it's a big skateboard with huge wheels that you take off-road.
Okay. Anyway, okay, asterism. All right.
Asterisms.
Anyway, so, if you're an astronomer, constellations do not have a big significance.
Yeah, okay.
Constellations are just the orientation of the stars that seem from Earth. The elements of a constellation often will have nothing to do with each other.
Right, okay.
One of them's here, 10 light years away, another one's 100 light years away, and, they're not related to each other.
I see. You wound up in California. What part of California did you wind up in?
Well, I lived in California 3 times. I went to grad school at Caltech for a year, 70 to 71. I didn't like Caltech, so I transferred to the University of Chicago. And then I lived in California again. That's Pasadena. I lived in California again in 83 to 89, living in West LA, and first being a postdoc at the University of Southern California, and then taking a job at TRW, a big aerospace firm.
Oh, okay.
Which no longer exists, part of Northrop Grumman, but TRW Auto Parts, I think, still exists. Anyway, and the work site's in Redondo Beach, but I lived in West LA. And then I was in New Mexico for 7 years, and then I came back to California and lived in Redondo Beach because I was going to be working at TRW. So I lived in Redondo Beach from 96 to 2005 when I moved to Bozeman. And living in Redondo Beach was great, since I would work there too, because I could bike to work.
Awesome.
Instead of having to fight California traffic.
I wish I had to bike to work. I live at Blunderbuss where my office is, so sometimes I have to make excuses to get out.
But you actually live somewhere else a lot of the time too, I think, right?
Yeah, out in Amsterdam. So you were in California, and a lot of what you're passionate about is the immigration experience that you had while living there. Can you talk a little more about that?
Well, I was actually aware of it before I moved back to California. You may be too young, but, have you ever heard of Proposition 187?
I think through you, but
Through
please
me.
remind me.
That was a citizen put on the ballot in '94 in California. I wasn't in California at the time, to keep illegal aliens, of which the state already had many, keep illegal aliens off the welfare rolls from getting public benefits. Also would keep their kids, the illegal alien kids, meaning kids who are themselves illegal aliens, because there are also the kids who are born here and who are given U.S. citizenship, so those aren't illegal aliens. Anyway, would have kept them out of the schools. And it passed in '94 with almost 60% of the vote.
So this bill was to keep illegal
Aliens from being burdens on California taxpayers.
Okay, and it passed 60% by 60%.
It passed big time,
Yeah, okay.
and in fact, it rescued the re-election campaign of then Republican Governor Pete Wilson. He was losing in the polls, in advance of the election, and then he glommed onto this, and he wound up winning, not as big. He beat Jerry Brown's sister.
Okay.
Jerry Brown was no longer governor. His sister Kathleen was running for governor, and at that time she was ahead in the polls. And
What happened? What happened after?
and then Pete Wilson won. Proposition 187 won. Proposition 87 then was strangled to death in the courts. Never went into effect. It was immediately sued.
You said 187 and 87.
I meant 187. Proposition 187.
Okay, so the bill that
It wasn't a bill. It was on the ballot. They'd collected probably hundreds of maybe a million signatures. I don't know how many. But
Okay, and
hundreds of thousands.
and so it passed by 60%, but it didn't go into effect.
It was strangled. It was beaten to death in the courts.
Got it. And so this, because of that, how did you feel?
By the time it got completely beaten in the courts, I was living in California again. I thought it was, terrible news, but it didn't seem like it was very surprising, just given the way things were going.
So this was blowback from activist groups.
Well, not really. It was the ACLU, I would think, more than anything else, the ACLU.
Okay, activist group.
And activist judges, activist federal judges. Mariana Faelzer, Pfaelzer, I think is her name. She ruled that this meant the state was regulating immigration. Well, no, it wasn't. It was just denying benefits to people who were here illegally. That's not the same as regulating immigration.
So the federal government should regulate immigration?
Well, but yes, the federal government does, and they're empowered to. She was saying, well, here's the state wading in, and it really wasn't. It was just a matter of, well, okay, we're stuck with these people here, but we don't want to have to support them. So anyway, I was aware of Proposition 187 in 1994. It was big national news. In fact, it put immigration, the subject as a whole, really back in the national news. There were other things going on as well, but I was just aware of it as a citizen who paid attention to public policy living in New Mexico at the time. And then I moved back to California in March of '96, and on and off there'd be plenty of stuff about immigration in the news, but the first specific thing I remember was an organization called California Coalition for Immigration Reform, CCIR. They were in the news in the Los Angeles Times. There was a picture in the Los Angeles Times of a billboard at the border between Arizona and California, one of the major highways or interstates, probably Interstate 10, I don't remember. And it was facing the Arizona side, and it said, and it was put up by CCIR, this organization, "Welcome to California, the illegal immigration state. Don't let this happen to your state." They had a picture of the billboard in the paper. It wasn't an ad. It was a part of a news story. Here's this billboard.
And that was coming in from Arizona?
Yeah, if you were coming in by road from Arizona. And I think there was a number, probably an 800 number to call. It was also there on the billboard, in the photo. So I phoned the number and probably left a message saying, I'd be interested to hear about your organization or something. You could send me information or call me back. I don't remember. Anyway, I got in touch with them. And this was led by a woman named Barbara Coe, C-O-E, who had been involved, she'd been heavily involved in getting Proposition 187 on the ballot and then its win. And she was a very brave and energetic lady who had somehow confronted problems with illegal immigration in her job as, I think she worked with, she was with the police department in one of the, like Anaheim or one of the other cities surrounding L.A. She was not a uniform person. She was in the support staff of one of the law enforcement agencies.
Oh, I see.
I think.
And so she led this grassroots effort to.
She was one of the leaders. Also, Ron Prince, and I don't know how Ron Prince originally got involved. These are people I know. Ron, I haven't spoken with in probably 15 years at least, but Barbara is dead now. She smoked herself to death. But anyway, they had a going organization. They had a monthly meeting, and I started going to the monthly meetings. They were held in Garden Grove, which was a 15-mile drive from where I lived in Redondo Beach. And and I just became an expert on the subject because I paid attention to it. It was I was concerned with what was happening to the country. I could see it here. I mean, this is enough of a story here, and it's going to spread. There are billboards in Spanish.
In Montana?
Oh, no, I haven't seen...
In California?
Yeah, in California, yeah. I don't think I've seen any billboards in Spanish here. But, if you look at, just go to the grocery store, most of the packaging...
Should there be countries who are multilingual? Does that matter?
Yeah, I think it's a bad thing because, you can't talk to your fellow citizens. Well, if everyone knows all the same languages, well, then you can. But then the extra languages are a waste of effort.
So if you're going to be here, then, and a lot of what I hear is if you're going to be here, then try and speak our language.
Yeah. There's a lot of history that's different between, the history is very different from what's going on now. When the last huge surge of immigration was happening around from 1880 to 1915 or so, the American elites realized that they needed people to assimilate. And so it was strongly encouraged. Americanization was encouraged.
So the Emma Lazarus quote on the Statue of Liberty will take
That's, I don't know if you and I have talked about that, but the statute has nothing to do with immigration. That's actually later. The conflation of that with immigration is actually more from the 1930s.
Well, you were just talking about bringing in whoever could contribute to society. Doesn't that resonate a little bit with the quote?
No, not at all. The quote is, we'll rescue you from your desperate straits. It's not a matter of you're valuable to us. It's a matter of we're gonna be good global citizens.
Compassionate,
yes.
So do you disagree? You disagree with the Statue of Liberty?
I think I will send you something from Mark Stein on that a video that I will ask you to watch. The Statue of Liberty's title is, real title. Do you know the real title of the Statue of Liberty?
Tell me.
You know.
I might, but I don't know what you're going to tell me.
Liberty Enlightening the World.
Okay, I didn't know that.
That is to say, this was a statue, a gift from the French to the Americans at the American Centennial of 1876, 1776, 1876, to celebrate what ordered liberty had accomplished in the 100-year-old American Republic. As a model for the rest of the world. It's liberty enlightening the world, sending light to the world. Look at our example and follow it if you like what you see. It's not a matter of inviting the world to come here.
Well, give me you're tired, you're poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free.
That was added to the statue a couple decades after it was made. That was not the message of the statue.
So the initial statue came from the French after the Revolutionary War.
No. It came 100 years after. It was a celebration of the American Centennial.
I see. And there was no initial quote on it. It was added later.
Right. Now, Emma Lazarus did write that poem. She was thinking, she was Jewish. She lived in New York, and she was concerned with the plight of Jews in Eastern Europe and Russia. The pogroms, the Pale of Settlement. That's not stuff I know much about, but and it was her. So her, what do they call it? It's a poem. It's a kind of poem. What do they call that kind of poem? Anyway, it was about that. She wrote it as a contribution to a fundraising effort for the pedestal on which the statue was going to be mounted, because the French were providing the statue, but they weren't providing the pedestal. So the Americans had to build a pedestal to erect the statue on. And so they had, fundraising drives to raise money for the pedestal. And she contributed this poem, and I don't know if, the poem was actually, someone paid money for it, as a contribution. I don't know. But it was obscure. It wasn't part of the statue when it was erected. And it was a friend of Emma Lazarus. Emma Lazarus died, I think, as a young woman, and a friend of hers, Georgina Schuyler, I think, in honor of her, thought to have the poem embossed on a plaque and then have the plaque put on the footing of the statue.
I see. So let's go back to immigration and the U.S. inviting people from this melting pot.
What I was in the middle of saying was the American elites saw the need for assimilation, and the other factor was you had people coming from a welter of different countries, from Poland, Czechoslovakia, France, Italy, further Eastern Europe, not anything really from Asia, and very little from south of the border. But they all spoke different languages, so they all had to learn English to get by. You didn't have these large enclaves. Nowadays, you have, the domination by one language, by Spanish. So people don't have to, just on that count, people don't have to assimilate. There are these large enclaves in Southern California, especially where, you could live your life and never need English because you're not dealing with people speaking anything other than Spanish because there's so many Spanish speakers.
And that's not good?
Yeah, that's not good. It's not good in my view. That is, if you care about having a country that's going to be a survivable country, a going concern.
So, it reminds me of just homogeny.
Yeah, homogeneity. It's homogeneity versus diversity. Well, diversity, it gets all kinds of people talking about diversity, but they basically talking nonsense.
So you don't like diversity?
Diversity is not a strength. And diversity, the kind they're talking about, is not a strength. People of different ethnic groups, of different religions, of different languages, they conflict with each other. It's worldwide.
So what's wrong with the community that encompasses all of that?
It's not a community. It's a bunch of warring tribes.
That's not true. People who have disagreements on faith come together a lot as friends.
Well, yeah, but they're part of a larger tradition. We're talking primarily about the European settlement of the country. That's all from Christendom.
So when it really comes down to it, they have their tribe, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's I mean, I can give you all kinds of quotes on this sort of thing, like Jared Taylor is someone I know who's notorious to people on the left. But anyway, saying, the Hutus and the Tutsis, Hutu and the Tutsi in Rwanda. They killed 800,000 of each other using machetes. And as he went on to say, think of what they could have done with a Panzer Corps of tanks.
Yeah.
or poison gas. I have one of the VDAIR blogs I did is a quote from the leader of Malaysia in the 60s, he's saying to someone from Australia, don't change your white Australia policy. That he didn't say that explicitly, but he's saying, with your policy, you don't have my problems. I've got Indians, I've got Malays, and I've got Chinese, and I've got nothing but conflict.
So you prefer a more homogenous society. I mean, is it so far as to think that the white race is superior to any, or they should just be separate?
Well, mostly separate. I mean, superior some ways, yeah, but inferior other ways. If you go to the Olympics, the long distance, the runners, they're all African descent. Blacks and whites and Asians have different, capabilities on average.
Okay, so not a blend of better and not as good as the things.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Blend of better and not so good can go with each race being better at some things.
Right. I mean, if you want value judgments, but it's not a statement necessarily about people being bad. It's a simple of different capabilities. I mean, do you believe in evolution?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, to me, it's pretty much a default idea that, as a scientist, what else could there be but there's been evolution? Well, the people develop in different environments. The environment puts different stresses on them and give different opportunities, and so they develop differently. So it's not surprising that people of different races would have different capabilities on average.
Okay, I see what you mean. You looped me in on an email with William Vogley, who wrote The Pity Party.
Yeah.
Why is compassion that is indifferent or opposed to practicality counterproductive?
Well, I would expect, for one thing, it's going to lead to frustration all around. Let's see, wait a minute. What did you say, impractical?
Indifferent.
Indifferent to practicality.
That is opposed to practicality. I kind of read it.
Yeah, say it again.
Why is compassion that is indifferent or opposed to practicality counterproductive?
Oh, well, I think my first response was, frustration, one thing, and development of cynicism. After, if you're compassionate and it doesn't lead to good results, it's likely to sour you on that.
The way I read it is, basically, if we're too compassionate, then you're opposed to practicality because there's only a finite amount of resources. You're over-giving and overextending yourself when you don't have that to give, and you're weakening yourself substantially also.
Well, okay. If you're doing it yourself, that is, you're being the beneficiary of someone else, then it's limited by what you can do, what you personally can do. But if it's a matter of you basically shanghaiing other people into your compassionate project, that's going to lead to resentment.
Okay, so can you force me to pay for your compassion?
Yeah.
What about practicality? Can you force me to pay for your practicality? So you're pro wall, the southern Mexico border.
Yeah, I am pro wall. That's not the most important thing regarding immigration, but yeah, I am in favor of the wall. So of a barrier in large stretches where nature isn't already enough of a barrier.
I see. So can I reverse the question on practicality though? Can you force me to pay for it?
When we talk about practicality, what are we referring to?
Let's talk about the differences. What is practical to you?
Well, it's something. What is something that's practical? Well, I guess you have to have the resources for it, and you'd also have to have the motive that you wanted to accomplish whatever the practical outcome was.
Kind of whether we can actually do it.
Well, yes, yeah, certainly. In fact, that would be one of Vogel's points that a lot of stuff you think you'd like to do, but in fact you don't really know how to do it.
I see my accountant as practical, and I'm off in the clouds.
Is that a fact?
Yeah, I do. She's great, but she's very practical, and she's always like, Tate, you can't afford to do this.
Really? Okay. Well, I think Vogel's point of view would be more like, or maybe I should quote Thomas Sowell, that a lot of policy, the intellectuals, policy is a matter of favoring things that sound good in comparison to things that actually work. Replace things that actually work with things that sound good.
What about dreaming and philosophy and trying those things out?
Well, I mean, why not? If you're doing it yourself, if you're not sucking everybody else into your schemes. Okay, you're an entrepreneur, and you might accept failure, and if you succeed, then you'll be a good example for other people.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the border wall then. Can you force people to pay for practicality?
Well, yeah. I mean, as a matter of if it's taxes, you're forcing people to pay for that. Yeah, sure. Like you pay for the military, and you pay for everything else the government does through taxes, and nowadays through borrowing.
Okay, we're going to get to healthcare, the healthcare part of compassion. Do you think the border wall will work?
Well, it's an incremental thing. Yes, it's better than not having it. When you say border wall, again, I mean a barrier in some places. It would be over hundreds of miles, but it wouldn't be entirely along. It wouldn't be along the entire border, because there are some parts of it that are impassable. I think down in the Rio Grande Valley. I haven't really been there, but.
What about like the ecosystems and?
Yeah, that's something you sacrifice. Yeah.
That would be sacrificed, and that's okay.
There is some sacrifice there. Well, and animals animals don't have borders, and they be hampered in coming back and forth. But considering the environmental impacts of bringing in massive numbers of people, to me, it's a clear win. To reduce the burden on the environment. You would reduce the burden on the environment and conservation matters by impeding illegal entry.
I'm imagining Armadillo going out to lunch on the other side of the border and having the wall built while he's gone.
There's some places I suppose they could build tunnels or some things that might be passable to animals. Along Route 93 between Missoula and Kalispell, there are these bridges over US 93, for animal.
Like a border crossing for animals?
They're road crossing for animals. Now, my friend, one of my friends who's a legislator, thinks it's been an enormous waste of money.
Because they don't use it or can't find it?
I don't know how much they're used. I think there's some evidence that they're used.
Okay, so maybe we do that and have a security guard or patrol at each one?
Oh, at each tunnel? Oh, God, no. I don't think so. No, you'd want to engineer it so they were passable by...
People-proof.
Yeah, people-proof, yeah.
I watch deer hop over the fences all the time around here.
Okay. But let's see, about the fence. It's a deterrent. It means it's much more trouble to cross the border than the fence not being there. And it's a delaying thing. And so, people talk about... what do they talk about? A high-tech electronic barrier? Well, the person who sets off the alarm could be be gone by the time a Border Patrol guy.
Because it could be hundreds of miles away.
Well, it probably wouldn't be that far, but it would be tens of miles. And on the other hand, there's the fence. The fence, it takes some doing to get across, especially if you got a double fence with a road in between, which would really be the best in many cases. But the concentration on the fence on the barrier has been less than optimum.
Okay.
If you ask me if you let me do things, I would do other things before I do the fence. E-verify.
Yeah. My understanding of the immigration problem is the majority of it people who fly here and just never leave.
Well, it's possibly a majority, but it hasn't been that historically. It's been more the other. But it's been, it's hard to get numbers that you can be absolutely sure of, because these are people who don't want to be found and so forth. Yeah. And we don't have an entry-exit system, so we don't really know when people leave, I think.
It's because they don't leave. When I go through like international checkpoint, my passport is scanned and I feel like I'm tracked.
I think that the entry-exit system, if it's in place, is not robustly in place. It's supposed to have been it was put into law in like '96 or so, but they've just never really done it. Visa overstays is what you're talking about, and they are a significant component. They may be 50%, they may be a bit more, they may still be under 50%. But anyway, they certainly wouldn't be affected by a wall.
How would you fix it?
Well, that would be.
And how do you get them to leave?
How you get them to leave is, I would tighten up admission for just visitor visas for one thing. There's an awful lot of gamesmanship goes on there. People who are really good candidates to actually be illegal aliens who get in.
So more rigorously check on who's coming to visit.
Yeah, and
like a visa program.
That's done at the consular and embassies, the U.S. consulates and embassies abroad. That's a State Department function, and you have officers, consular officers. That's what they do, is that they interview people who want visitor visas, businessmen, students, just tourists, you name it. And they're supposed to be, making sure as they can that these are people who are going to return home at the end of their visa. Well, but always the pressure is to get to yes. So even if a line officer turns someone down, well, then that line officer is probably going to, there are probably going to be complaints. And the line officer will have his management, his or her.
So they'll appeal it?
Yeah, there'll be appeal. And so, if you say yes, no problem, everyone's happy, except we who are accepting people who are going to become illegal aliens.
It just seems so, it's like there's a movie about pre-crime with Tom Cruise, Minority Report, where they arrest people before they commit a crime.
Oh, I guess I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Isn't that how you morally deal with that?
Well, I don't think there's anything immoral at all about that. There is no moral entitlement. There's no entitlement to come visit the United States.
Okay.
These are not U.S. citizens. They are aliens.
So make the process harder, and maybe they'll appreciate it more.
And get the entry-exit system so that it's actually robust. You say there is some aspect of exit that there's some record of your exit. I just don't know about that.
Yeah, I'm
not disputing. I just something I don't know about.
Yeah, no. When I leave a country, I typically get an exit stamp and then an entry stamp back to wherever I go. There's you have to exit a country and then enter a country formally.
But the question is, when someone exits the United States, is that recorded in any way?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Okay, well, there would still be a problem with people who would just sort of go to the ground, come here.
I'm going to check it. I'm going to fact check that to make sure we got our facts straight on that. All right.
You might look up entry, exit. But anyway, there would always be some illegal immigration. But it would be a different thing if there were 50,000 people here who were illegal
versus millions.
But there's 11 million is the official figure, and there are some people who insist that it's 20 million or 30 million. Some people get upset if they think it's 20 million and you say, well, 11 million. They get hyper over that. I mean, it's a big problem.
So the border wall. We'll go back to this really quick. I just want to know, because should kids be taken away from their parents if the family is caught entering the country illegally?
Yeah, and it's they did it.
Isn't that inhumane?
I don't care. It's it was their choice. It was their choice. Yeah, and the separation, in fact, is it's due to judicial activism, because it's that they can't keep kids, I think, in detention, detention for more than 20 days because of a court case.
In an adult facility also. They can't keep a child in an adult facility.
Well, yeah, okay, but I think you can't keep a kid, period, for more than 20 days.
Okay.
And so if you want to keep the adult, you have to separate them from the kid.
Right. So what would you do? How do you solve this? It is what it is.
I would ideally pass legislation to say that court case is wrong. No, we're not. That's not the law, and keep the families in confinement. Well, there are other
together
things.
Maybe.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay, so you're forward. You think that because they crossed illegally, there should be some repercussion, but you are open to families being housed together as a unit.
Yeah, sure.
While they wait.
Sure, yeah, that's fine. But I'm also in favor of what's happening nowadays is they're making claims for asylum, and the claims are all effectively always meritless. They should be turned down on the spot and
So
sent
people
back.
abuse it.
Yeah, it's nothing but abuse, basically, or just 95% abuse. The people who are Mexicans do get turned around and just sent right back across the border, but you can't do that with someone who's here from Guatemala. And I think you should be able to do that. Just shove them back across the border into Mexico. It's your problem.
Would you ever travel to Mexico or Central America?
I don't have any real desire to. I don't have a desire to go to Europe really either.
Okay.
But
You travel a little bit within the States, I know.
yeah, I travel in the U.S.
Do you just not like people?
I'm not fond of humanity. Some individuals are okay.
Yeah.
You're a friend.
Likewise, thanks.
I'm not high on humanity.
Yeah, it's hard to love humanity sometimes, I think.
That's the what do people say? I love humanity. It's people I can't stand.
Yeah, right.
I'm the opposite. I hate humanity, but some individuals are okay.
How many people should we allow in the country per year?
You mean, are you talking about for settlement, for immigration, or are you talking about visitors?
For immigration and visitors, yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up after what we talked about.
I don't have a good number for visitors. For permanent immigration, I would make it down in the few thousand people a year.
Okay, right. I think it was over 1 million, and then it was like 80,000 or something right now.
Oh, no, it's 1 million.
It's still 1 million.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and then there's still significant, hundreds of thousands of illegal.
I feel like they lessened it under Trump.
Well, it fell for a while. Not the legal, that hasn't changed, because that change means a change in law, but the illegal was turned down lower for a while because people were taking Trump's statements seriously.
I see.
And I think he meant them seriously, but nothing's really happening. It's not being, so the levels have come back up. And actually, they're worse right now because of this asylum abuse and the families coming in. And they realize if they got a kid, it's a ticket to the country. They get it's catch and release, and then they'll go and they go into the woodwork. They'll for the most part they won't be unless they're stopped in a traffic stop and their status comes up. Well, they're home free.
Well, on that note, we're in the midst of the largest migration in human history.
You mean not just the U.S., but around the world?
Around the world,
yeah.
What social, political, and economic capital do countries lose when their people migrate or are forced to flee?
Yeah, I don't usually look at it that way because I'm concerned about the United States, but that's a good point that other people have made, that it's the people who are fleeing these other countries are often the most entrepreneurial, enterprising, they're often the best equipped of anyone to stay behind and try to improve the situation back there. In other words, they're losing relatively their best capital often.
The problem solvers who can help them out of the situation they're in.
Yeah, no, I don't think these problems are necessarily very solvable in any way that people are going to consider satisfactory. But
like a war zone.
Well, I don't just mean that. I mean, if Africa has 4 billion people at the end of the century, it's going to be disastrous.
Yeah, they're gross. They're insane.
No matter how many smart people there are who are there helping them. So not every problem has a solution that people are going to regard as acceptable. But in any event, yeah, you're kind of strip mining these countries of their best assets.
I want to know where in your life you exercise compassion.
With my parakeets.
With your parakeets?
Is
that it?
I have 5 parakeets. Well, I've donated large amounts of money. I mean, to civic organizations over time, I've donated at least $200,000.
You are kind of a tree hugger.
Well, I'm a tree, yeah, right, to environmental organizations. Not so much those anymore, but I would say I have compassion for future generations. I see this country going in so many bad directions, and I've had a good life. I mean, I haven't necessarily been happy, but that's my fault. I've had a good life, and it's a good country, and it's just it's degrading, and it's needlessly degrading because of bad choices and laziness, and mental laziness, and so to me that's a form of compassion of wanting future generations. And I don't have any future generations. I don't have kids, so I don't have any stake in the future. I'll be dead in 20 years or 25 years. So there's compassion for that.
I think you'll make it to 100.
Okay, 30 years, and I can have compassion for individuals where somehow there's something about them confronts me, and I've helped individuals. I mean, sometimes it's friends, but I'm trying to think of any cases. I've never given a large sum of money to someone who was hurting. I don't think.
You're compassionate in some ways.
Well, I mean, I've already said some way I'm compassionate.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about, besides my pet parakeets, I'm concerned about human treatment of other animals in general.
You're a vegetarian.
I'm a vegetarian, close to vegan because of that, and I do donate modest amounts to, Montana Raptor Conservation Center and Stafford Animal Shelter in Livingston, where I got my parakeets are mostly rescues, and to Farm Sanctuary, and you and I have talked about that film,
Dominion,
which is a very hard film to watch.
Yeah, it is.
So that's another reason I'm not a fan of humanity, because of the way humanity behaves with respect to the rest of, I'd say, God's creation, except I'm an atheist.
You're an atheist. I was going to ask what your relationship to God was.
Yeah, well, I don't think there is a God.
Okay. So a little bit of the event, compassion versus practicality, has to do with socialized medicine.
Yeah.
Are you for socialized medicine? Should everybody have free healthcare?
No.
Why not?
Well, things that are free aren't valued, for one thing. And in fact, that's a large part of it, because then there's very heavy use for marginal cases, and it bids up the cost, puts a big load on the system. It basically, can't think of the word. It's true of any welfare program, that you're being impressed into. By impressed, I don't mean someone else is impressive. I mean you're being shanghaied. There's some other word for it too. Doesn't come to mind right now. Into a charity that you wouldn't necessarily choose yourself.
So you can't force me to pay for your compassion.
Yeah. That's that same idea. And I think this is something else you and I have talked about, which is that, and this Marvin Olasky book gives the history of it. The book is called The Tragedy of American Compassion, and what it is a history of private charity in America since the founding. And the lesson learned over and over again is that public charity doesn't work very well, whereas private charity does, because private charity is able to be discerning and particular to the individual who's being helped. You can make sure that the individual is invested in not staying on the dole, but in advancing him or herself. That is, stepping up, taking some responsibility.
Sure.
But you can't do that with government programs, which have to be written to be neutral and so forth. And the other aspect of sort of one-on-one charity or private charity is that, and I'm sure you and I have talked about this, that if you were helping me out, in most cases, I wouldn't want to just take and take and take without feeling that I could reciprocate some. Now, some people will probably be black holes for compassion,
sure,
for charity, but I don't think most of us would if it's one-on-one. But if it's a government agency, why? Hey, they got to pay me.
So I see things like automation coming, and it's gonna come and wipe out a bunch of jobs.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. I don't know what's going to happen there.
So people living in areas where they can't afford to live because they're in the service industry, Bozeman would be a good example, who have to have 2 or 3 jobs? Is it just tough it up and live a miserable life, or should it be okay to have assistance on a basic need like healthcare?
I just don't think it works.
I mean, could you make the case that if I am not afraid to go to the doctor because of the outrageous price it always is, I'll stay up on my preventative measures better, and it's practical because I'll have avoided an emergency situation that is more expensive because I waited and thought, gosh, I'm not going to go because this is really expensive, until it's too late.
Well, I mean, there's bad luck, and I've got pretty good genes, lucky genes, got lousy vision, and I've had a few other things, but some things is just that's the breaks. But yeah, without the
So like population control, like Darwin?
well, that's yeah, that's part of it.
It's not very compassionate.
That's part of it. Is too many people chasing too few resources. Why do you think Gallatin County is getting expensive? Is because of the influx of people.
Are there enough resources? We just mismanage it.
I don't think so. And land, for instance, it's not.
I mean, you're a baby boomer, right? Here's a theory I have.
Okay.
That after World War II, everyone came back and all they wanted was comfort because the world was so uncomfortable for that whole time of World War II. They came back and wanted comfort, which involved a lot of consuming. Mm-hmm. And it wore off on the baby boomer generation and was this consumption of a lot of resources that we can't handle. Is there a check that we need on our standard of living in order to allow for our population to grow and succeed?
I wouldn't, me personally, I wouldn't do anything that for the purpose of having our population grow, because I think our population is already too high.
Okay.
By a lot. So as a matter of policy, I'm not going to push for anything for a reason like that. I think that subsidizing people is just not the way to go. I think that you shouldn't, but you shouldn't be subsidizing well-off people either.
So tax breaks.
I think I'm well off. I'm on Medicare, as I've told you, to my shame and disgust. And of course, I did pay into the system.
So you paid it forward, and now you're reaping the benefits.
Well, yeah, but
as opposed to just reaping the benefits.
Yes, but Medicare is a significant burden on other taxpayers. It's let's see, I still pay premiums to Medicare, but that's much less than the total effective premium if I had to buy private health insurance. I think old people should buy private health insurance, and it'll get more expensive as you get older, and that's something you save for. It'd be much better than having, much more sustainable than having government programs that aren't sustainable. You're probably,
like the military.
Well, no. The military has a function that it seems to me is a basic function of government.
Yeah, but I mean, with all the spending on it, a few billion for healthcare should be easy, shouldn't it?
What do you mean a few billion for healthcare?
We're spending trillions on the military, triple the amount of anyone lesser than the U.S. I mean, couldn't we use some of that money for making a healthy society?
What do you think is the military budget of the U.S. in a year? No, don't look it up.
I think it is over $1 trillion.
I think it's more like 700 billion.
Okay.
And now that doesn't count the Veterans Administration and the cost of prior wars.
Right.
It doesn't count interest on the national debt. Okay, but it's that side. Now, how big? Now, again, you're not going to look this up. How big is Medicaid nationwide?
I'm not sure.
Well, guess.
I think Medicaid nationwide is 70 million.
Well, you meant billion, probably. You said
nationwide. Well, I mean, there's about 300 million.
Well, you just said 70 million.
Yeah.
I didn't mean the number of people. I meant the cost.
Oh, I have no idea.
You can take a guess.
$1 trillion.
Well, no, that's more like 500 billion.
Okay.
And Medicare and Social Security together are another trillion. So it's actually quite a bit more on these welfare things than on
to pay for it all. Okay.
Yeah, so we're not talking about a few billion. We're talking about hundreds of billions per year.
And able to do it.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
Well, let's see, what was I actually answering? Oh, well, whether I was in favor of...
We're talking about whether it was practical to be compassionate about free healthcare.
Yeah. I don't think it's practical because the cost will just explode.
Okay.
I mean, and the cost will explode way beyond what you would guess, because again, people just use it to their heart's content. There's no cost, so there's no out-of-pocket cost. So
Yeah, I mean, but that would be the thing. People would use it a lot because they could use it to fight pre-existing conditions, and they wouldn't be afraid to go to the doctors.
in fact, that particular question has been looked at, and you would certainly catch some things and thereby save money on those people, but it's more a matter of, there's a particular condition that if you have it, it's very bad, and it can be detected in tests. So you could test everybody, and you would catch those cases and catch them early and save that money. But doing the test for everybody actually winds up costing more than treating the people who get sick because they didn't get tested.
So some people get it and some people don't.
Well, no, I'm saying if universal testing does not pay for itself. It sounds like a good idea. I mean, it sounds plausible, but in general, it doesn't work that way.
Okay. Well, we'll cut it there, and I'm going to explore this more with you.
Okay.
In our April event.
Okay.
Thanks so much for your time, Paul. It's always a pleasure seeing you. Can't wait to dive in the ring with you.
Thanks for having me on.
That's a wrap on this episode. And as always, there's a lot to consider. But one thing is certain. As humans, we approach big topics from very different angles. This episode was brought to you by the Montana Governor's Office of Economic Development, the City of Bozeman, 10 Directions, Hatch, the Yellowstone Theological Institute, Montucky Cold Snacks, the Nova Cafe, Zocalo Coffee House, Whistle Pig Korean, Dean Zesty Booch, Bliss, the Sola Cafe and Market, Shank Construction, Ben Johnson Photography, Loken Productions, Superfluous Industries, and Blunderbuss.
A special thank you to Katie Kaminsky, Tia Goebel, and Connor Mulvaney.
A shout out to our editors and media team, Pat Loken, Jessup Sandoval, Allison Gregory, Shannon Hughes, Jessica Byerly, Jacob Desch, Nathaniel Johns, and Nicholas Hill. Thanks as always to Debbie Shank, Joe Fedora, Ethan Hoare, and Elliot Canfield. Do you have an issue that's riddled by gridlock in your community? We want to hear from you. Shoot me a message at tate@iaminterchange.org. That's tate@iaminterchange.org. Until next time, share airtime and don't ruin dinner.